Hey folks, welcome to the fifth episode of Power Tips. In the previous video, we started our plugin development journey by creating a first plugin. Now, if you have missed that video, then you can find the link on the top right corner. In this video, we would be learning how to register your plugin that we have created in the previous video. We would be registering that plugin in Dataverse and make it event driven. And then we would be learning some debugging skills on the plugin. So let's get started. Now, if you remember from our previous video, this is the code that we have created. The link to this code will be available in the video's description. Now, we are going to build this plugin and register it in Dataverse. So let's go ahead and build the project. So now it says build successful, right? So now there are two ways you can register this plugin in Dataverse. First one is using the plugin registration tool provided by Microsoft, which is the part of the SDK. You can get this plugin registration tool by downloading it from NuGet packages or from cds.tools. All of those informations are also provided in the video that I had done before, and again the link will be provided in the video's description, as well as it will appear on the top right corner of your screen. The other method to register a plugin could be using XRM Toolbox. In the XRM Toolbox, you have a tool called plugin registration, and in here also you can register the plugin. The only difference between the two is there is no debugging available in the XRM Toolbox version of plugin registration, which we will be looking in further video how to do debugging. Now let's just use the plugin registration tool and register our plugin. So to register a plugin, click on this button and say register new assembly. Now you would get this pop-up where you have to navigate to your assembly, and to navigate to your assembly you can go back to your code, go to the Solution Explorer and right click on your project and say open folder in File Explorer. So this would open the folder in the File Explorer, and you can navigate to your bin, debug, and you would find powertips.plugin training.dll over here. I can copy this path and then go to my plugin registration tool and click on these three dots to open up the browser. Okay, now I've navigated to that location and I'll search for that powertips.plugins.training.dll and I'll select that. Once I've selected it, it will load all the plugins that are available on that particular assembly. So you should see at least one. You can, if you are on the online CRM, you can keep this on sandbox and this to database, and then click on register selected plugin. Now after a second, you should see this pop-up where it would say one plugin assembly registered and one plugin is registered. Can click on OK to close the box, and it would appear as an assembly in this list. And here you go, right? So powertips.plugins.training appear over here, and then the plugins appear over here. Now the assembly is registered, and along with that the plugin associated to that assembly also gets registered. But we have not made it event driven yet, right? So we only have the plugin, but we have not associated any event to that particular plugin. Now let's go back to the code to review what we were doing. We were calling this on an entity called superhero, and this was based on the update of the entity record. So our event is going to be on the update of superhero entity, and the field that we were looking for updating was show heights power stats. So anytime the show height power stats changes, that's when we were trying to do the calculation. So we want our plugin to only fire when the show hide power stats is getting changed, right? If any other field is getting changed, we don't want our plugin to be fired. So let's go back to the plugin registration tool and click on this button again. And now you can see that there's an additional option called register new step. Click on that. It should present you with a modal where you can configure your step. Message is nothing but your event. What the event is it going to be create, update, delete, associate, set state? There are a lot of messages that are available in Dynamics. Well, now Dataverse, right? So our message is going to be update, and then our primary entity is going to be that superhero entity. So pmav underscore superhero entity. Secondary entity, we don't have any, right? Then what we said is we want our plugin to only fire when the show hide power stats is changed. So right now, this filtering attributes, and this only applies to update, that filtering attributes, it has an option to choose when to fire the plugin. And by default, it selects all the attributes. But you can configure this by selecting these three dots, which would present you with another modal, and it gives you a list of all the attributes associated to that particular entity. So you can unselect this and select the only one that you want. So in our case, we want the show hide power stats as a boolean. Now remember, if you select an ID field, like if I select superhero ID, which is a unique identifier, if I have selected that in our filtering attributes, it's going to fire the plugin all the time because unique identifiers are always supplied on the update. So you have to be careful in what you're selecting as your filtering attributes. In our case, we are just concerned about show hide power stats. So that is what we have selected here, and we'll click on OK. Now, everything else remains the same. You can change the description if you want to. The step name you can change if you want to, but I'm going to keep it as default because that's the best practice I've seen been followed over the years. And run in user context. That is something that if you want your plugin to be executed in someone else's behalf, let's say if I'm the user and if I'm the one who is updating the record, but I want the backend job to always execute as the admin record, then I will change this and select the admin record. The next one is the execution order. The execution order determines when your plugin is going to execute in which order. This only mostly applies when it is when it is synchronous plugin. If the execution mode is synchronous, only then the execution order is applied. If it is asynchronous, then all the plugins will fire at the same time. Next one is the event pipeline stage, which is the important one. There are 4 stages for the event pipeline. Stage 1 is pre-validation, which is also having a number called as 10. Then there's stage 2, which is called pre-operation, which is this one, and that has stage number 20. Then there's a core operation, which is not available over here because you cannot register a plugin on the core operation. The stage number for core operation is 30. The last stage is post operation, which is having stage number 40. So pre-validation, pre-operation, and post-operation are the 3 stages which we can register our plugin. Pre-validation is the stage that happens before the transaction kicks off. Pre-operation is the stage where transaction kicks off but is not committed into the database yet. Post-operation happens after the transaction has been committed to the database, but it is still in the transaction layer. If you're on the online instance, then deployment will always be defaulted to server. In my case, I want to keep it as execution mode as synchronous, and I want to change this to post operation. And I'm going to register. Once you have registered the step, it should appear here in the window. Now that you have registered the step, let's go and fire that event in Dataverse. Before we execute the logic, let's look at the code. So in the code, we were taking the value of the attribute showHidePowerStats, and if it was true, then we took the value of all the 6 attributes of the PowerStats for that particular superhero and then made an average. Then that average was updated on the entity. In this example, the value of 88, 83, 35, 100, 95 and 85 should be summed up, divided by 6, and then that value should appear on the combined power stats. That's the expected outcome. So now let's go and select yes on our show hide power stats and click on save. As soon as I click on save, the plugin that we have registered moments ago will fire and should now update the power stats here. Save, and there you go. Oh, it did update the power stats, which means the plugin did get fired, but it got updated with stats 0. That means there's an error. But this proves that our plugin works and the event did get fired. But how do we solve this error? Now we would be looking at how to do debugging of a plugin. In order to do the debugging of a plugin, we have to install the profiler. If you have connected your environment and if you don't see debug or uninstall profiler as an option, you would see install profiler as an option. I've already installed the profiler, so I see uninstall profiler as an option. But if you're seeing install profiler as an option, click on that and it will take a few minutes for that to install. Once it's installed, then you should see all the other options like debugging, start profiling, and yeah, so those are the two that you should see as an added option. So in order to start the debugging, first we have to profile the plugin, which means first we have to replicate the issue. In the profiling, we have two options, exceptions and persist to entity. Persist to entity means there's an entity that's available in Dynamics, which is part of that profiler solution. So if you go to the settings, you should see an entity called plugin profiles. And that is what exactly we are going to use. We are going to persist that profile on an entity. So I'm going to start the profiling here. And once it starts the profile, you should see in the bracket it says profile, and even the icon changes of that particular step. If you see any other step, then this is the default icon that you should see. But if you're profiling a step, then the icon is this. Now we have to go back and try to replicate the issue. So I'm going to open up a different record because we have already used this record. And in this case, we don't have anything on the show hide power stats and we don't have anything in the combined power stats value. Now I'm going to change this to yes, and then it's unsaved. Now I'm going to click on save. And that provided the value over here. And now let's go to our plugin profile records. You should see a profile for plugins, and I'm not able to expand this, so let me just refresh it. It happens from time to time that you're not able to use this properly. So that's my profile, right? And this is my plugin, as you can see, that executed at 4:33 p.m. and for some reason I have 2 of them. That's fine, right? Okay, so now I can use this profile to see what happened with my execution. Now that we have the profile created, we are gonna debug the plugin. So first thing that we want to do is put a debugger over here, and then go to your debug option and click attach to process. Now in this window, you can search for plugin registration tool and then click on attach. Once it's attached, then you can see that the Visual Studio changes its interface in the debugging mode. Now you can go back to your plugin registration tool and you can see hot reload available over here and click on debug. Oh, before you start debugging, let's just stop profiling because we don't want to profile it again. Okay, so now it's not profiled anymore, and now let's debug. So clicking the download button gives me the option of the profile that was saved on that particular entity. I'm going to select the first one. Then the second is selecting the assembly location. I'm going to the same path that we had gone before, and I'll select the powertips.plugins.training. And as soon as I select that, my plugin should auto-populate for me based on the profile. Now, because I'm already debugging and I have already set the debug pointer, as soon as I click on start execution, I should see my debugger pointer is invoked, right? So I can see that my debugger is started. I can do F10, tap on, and then see this value was set to true. Yeah, and then navigate down. Okay, and then inspect the value. Oh, intelligence can 0 0 0 0 0. Why did that happen? So all of these values are coming out to be 0. So let's just see what's in the context. So in the context, if we go to the input parameters and look at the target and the attributes of the target, there are only 5 attributes, right? There's only show height power stats, and there's the ID, and then the modified on, modified by, and modified on behalf by, right? Whereas the attributes that we are trying to get from the target does not exist. Why is that? Just I'm going to continue this and close it and stop debugging and then see why that happened. So that happened because whenever the update is invoked, the target only contains the values that got updated. In our case, only show hide power stats is getting updated. So only that value is available in the target. But how do we get the other values of the record? So for that, you have to go back to the registration tool and register an image. Now there are two options. So on the post update, you would have the pre-image, which is the value before the updates, and then the post image, which is the value after the updates. In our case, we do not want the values before the update. We only want the values after the update. So I'm gonna do the post image and I'm gonna give a name as image. Okay, and I'm gonna register an image here. So now that appears under the step. Go back to the code and change this to say post image. Okay, and that would happen on all the 6 attributes. Now at this point, I want to first test my code locally before I want to update the server. So first, build the solution, make sure there are no errors in the solution. I want to create a profile with an image. So I'm going to start profiling again, and then I'm going to replicate the issue again. In this case, I'm going to select another record and click on yes and save. Okay, now if I go to my plugin profiles, I should see another plugin profile getting created. I can stop the profiler. Now I have a plugin profile ready with an image that I can use for debugging. Now I go back to my Visual Studio, click on debug and do reattach. Reattach is a quick way of attaching to the same process again. So now my Visual Studio is in the debug mode. I go back to my plugin registration tool, click on debug, and then select the download button, which should open up the same window that had opened up before. I select the first profile, then I select the assembly. In this case, I'm gonna select the same assembly again, and that should pre-populate the plugin for me. Now start execution. Debug point hit. Okay, come down. It's true. Now let's see if I get all the 6 values. Okay, so there you go. I got intelligence as 63, strength came at 80, speed came at 35, and all the other values are over there as well. So now if I do an update to that entity, that executed successfully. I go back to the record and I do a refresh here, and there you go, right? So this was my local debugging without updating the assembly. Now I've proved that my code works, so I'm going to stop the debugging just one more time, build it successfully, and then update the assembly. So at the end, you have to make sure that your code that you have tested locally is now deployed to your server. In order to do that, you have to update the assembly again. So you select the assembly, click on the update button, and then select the DLL file. And in here, what this tool does is it deselects everything by default. You want to make sure that all of your plugins are re-registered again. So make sure that you select all and then click on update selected plugins. So that is how you would do local debugging. But you don't want to do debugging on productions, or you don't want to install profilers on productions. And to make sure that you don't have to do that and you can still identify the issues, the recommended approach is to write traces. So to write traces, you have to go back to your plugin. In order to write traces, all you have to do is call context.trace and then write what you want here. So in this case, I want to trace the value for my show hide power stats. So value for show hide is gonna be show hide power stats. Okay. Similarly, I want to trace the value for intelligence, strength, and all of this as well. So I'm going to trace it here. Context.trace, and then so I'm going to do intelligence first. Intelligence. Then is going to be strength. Strength. Then is going to be speed. Durability. Power. Compact. And that's it, right? So I'm tracing all the values. So now I know what the score should be, and I will also trace the score as well, just to see what the outcome came out to be, right? Average score. Okay, and then I can do the updates here. Now I'm going to save it again to the build and update the assembly. Oops, wrong assembly. Okay, select all and select the update selected. Now, once the assembly is updated with the necessary code. So you can use the plugin trace viewer tool to look at all the traces. I'm gonna do all, and my refresh mode is on, set to auto. So now if I go back to my record, let me select a different record this time. Select yes, save, and the values got updated. And if I go to my trace logs, did not get auto updated. There you go. And here you can see everything is getting logged from my target. Everything gets logged, and here are my custom traces. So value for show hide, then intelligence, and then the average, and then it shows the updated values as well. That's it, folks, in this video. Hope you liked it. In the next video, we are going to learn how to write unit test cases on the plugins. Do check out these videos and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Until next time.